Broadstairs, lovely sand, the sea, seagulls, maybe an ice cream, and of course, Nazi spies. Welcome to Kentish Tales and Tales of Kent, a whole season on the dark arts of espionage and spying. Mrs. Florence Johnson in 1935 called the police here in Broadstairs. She was a bit concerned about her lodger, Dr. Herman Gertz, and his young niece. She hadn't seen him in a while. She looked at the house, the milk was still outside, and then she found a note which read, "Can you look after mein combination?" She took this to mean his motorbike, but she looked outside, she looked next to the bungalow, and she couldn't see it anywhere. So she rang the police to investigate. They promptly came round and they too couldn't find it. But they did find lots of really interesting things. So they immediately called MI5, who turned up lickety-split. So what did MI5 find in the bungalow? Well, they found drawings of airplanes. They found sketches of airfields. They found a whole map of the southeast with every single RAF base noted down. And perhaps most alarmingly of all, they found an application form for Dr. Hermann Gertz to join the Luftwaffe. With Hitler coming to power in Germany in 1933, British and German relations had changed dramatically. Hitler was intent on tearing up the Treaty of Versailles and rearming Germany. No wonder the British authorities had a lot of questions about a German tourist. William Hinchley Cook, who's in charge of the investigation of MI5, immediately ordered that all ports be put on high alert for the return of Dr. Hermann Gertz. Next to Stanley Road, where he lived in his bungalow, is this close. For a second I thought it read, well, you know. So who was Dr. Gertz? Well, him and his 19-year-old niece, Marianne Emil, had arrived here in August 1935. They cut quite a scene as they flashed down the lanes and roads of Broadstairs in their Zandap motorcycle. A young airman happened to see them, a Kenneth Lewis, and he was quite smitten by Marianne, and he wrote a letter saying he'd always wanted to have a lady motorcyclist pen friend. They were starting to get on so well that the Germans invited Kenneth over for tea. Turned out he was an airman who was serving on the Lyon-Solent base. They were fascinated by this. They asked him, could you send us information on the latest planes you have there? Maybe some photographs, maybe some aerial photographs of the whole base and area. That would be stupendous. Marianne said, I'd love to be a pen pal of yours, Kenneth, but could you send all of the letters to me on special RAF headed note paper? That would be lovely, thank you. She said not to worry at all, because in the next war we will both be allies, yeah? The doctor did return to Harwich, the port, where he was promptly arrested and brought back to here, Broadstairs, to the police station. Isn't a police station anymore. He confessed, yes, the sketchbooks were mine, yes, I had made drawings of planes, but this was because I was writing a novel called Bridge Over Grey Waters. It was then they decided to arrest him and charge him, and he was sent to the Old Bailey to stand trial.
You're under arrest.
I couldn't help it.
I don't know how much you had to drink, son, but it's too much. In the car.
No, I just threw the ball back at him.
You can tell me all about it at the station.
What's Cassandra going to say about this?
There's no need for Cassandra to know anything about it.
And what happens?
When Gertz stood up in court, he was at pains to point out that he was a man who had just fallen on hard times. Yes, he had been in the German intelligence service in the First World War, where apparently he'd been very good at getting out information from Russians in some way or another. But times had become tough, and he'd run out of money, and a friend had suggested he take up novel writing as a way to make some cash. When he was asked about this, he did have to point out that Yes, in fact, the novel that he was writing was all in his head at this point, and he didn't have any notes on it. The prosecution also showed that Gertz had made an accurate drawing of RAF Maidstone, which had highlighted where the hangars and fuel dumps were. The jury then went out to consider their verdict. Over the course of the weekend, while they were still debating their verdict, Hitler remilitarised the Rhineland. It is probably not that surprising that the jury found him guilty and sentenced him to jail. His mother, on hearing the news, apparently fainted clean away and then woke up and descended into weeping. So he served out his time, 4 years in fact, here at Maidstone Prison. And then he was released in February 1939, not too long before the outbreak of the Second World War. And that was the last we were going to hear of the good doctor, wasn't it? Well, no, because while he was here, he happened to meet some new friends, some Irish friends, who happened to be in the IRA. By September 1939, the Second World War had broken out, and the Nazi authorities were looking to make use of Dr. Gertz and his connections by parachuting him into Ireland. However, unfortunately for him, his second parachute, which had his radio on, went missing, so he couldn't make contact with his contact. So instead, he had to walk 80 miles towards a place he didn't know the direction of. Did I mention he was in a full Luftwaffe uniform? He was in a full Luftwaffe uniform. He got so lost he had to stop in at a police station and ask for directions. And they gave them to him, and he eventually got there in the end. When he finally met his IRA contact, they were very pleased to see him, as he handed over hundreds of thousands worth of dollars for their campaign. However, that was not the only reason he was there in Ireland. He was there to judge whether Plan Kathleen would be a success. Plan Kathleen was an IRA plot to invade the north of Ireland with IRA rebels assisted by Nazis. The Nazis and the IRA hoped that it would look a bit like this. This is a film, Nazi propaganda film, set in Ireland during the war. Despite their Guinness drinking ways, he thought they were a load of radicals who had no real hope of any success. He even left their safe house. Instead, he went to go and live with a load of elderly Republican ladies, which I think probably went a bit like this.
Won't have a cup.
No thanks, Mrs. Doyle. Honestly, I won't have a cup.
Are you sure now it's hot?
No, I'm not in the mood, thanks.
All right, so. I go on, would you not have a drop?
No thanks anyway,
Just a
Mrs.
little
Doyle.
cup.
I'm fine.
Go on.
No, really.
I'll tell you what, Father. I'll pour
Seriously?
a cup for you anyway.
He would eventually be captured and interned for the rest of the war. When it got to the end of the conflict, they asked him if he wanted to go back to Germany. He said no. However, soon enough they told him he had to go back to East Germany. But it seems he was very reluctant to go back and meet the Russians who he'd last seen in the First World War. So he took a capsule out, put it in his mouth, crunched down on it, and promptly died. He was then taken to a graveyard and buried. The actual funeral consisted of his coffin being draped in the Nazi swastika, and there were various IRA dignitaries there, as well as some old Republican grannies who'd taken a bit of a shine to him. One can't help but think that if he'd been a bit clearer in his instructions, that his landlady wouldn't have confused combinations as a motorcycle, when actually what he meant was his driving overalls. Perhaps if the doctor had indulged in some of the other great things in Broadstairs, he never would have got into trouble. If you enjoyed this tale, then click on the link below and you'll find a website which will give you all sorts of reading material. If you want any other time period, person or place covered, then pop it in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Kentish Tales and Tales of Kent.